Before we get into this, I hate crickets. You're gonna hear them in the background because I forgot to shut the window in my room for about half of this recording. Damn it. You know, we might not want to admit it, but the entire GPU market in the PC gaming space is completely dominated by Nvidia. Here's the Steam hardware survey. They're at like 75% market share of people who play Steam. And that is despite even Nvidia's last generation or current generation of graphics cards isn't really even going that well. The RTX 5070, you see how poorly it's been reviewed. But then at the end of the day, they still end up getting Nvidia. Here's the RTX 5070, and it's still now appearing on the Steam hardware survey as some of the most used graphics cards. 1.57% of the Steam hardware survey. And all of the 50 series graphics cards from Nvidia have also showed up on this list now. So there's those, and here's also the RTX 5090. So every single one has showed up here, but there is absolutely none of the new AMD graphics cards that have showed up on this list as of yet. That's a clear sign that people are choosing to buy Nvidia graphics cards, and that also shows with how many units are being shipped out. 92% of the AIB shipments at the beginning of this year, quarter 1 2025, was Nvidia. But that really begs the question, is why do they maintain this massive amount of market dominance when AMD does offer good options? They put up good performance numbers, they have feature comparisons to Nvidia now, but they still don't sell as much. So why is that the case? As much as we might want to like hate on like using upscaling or upscaling isn't even as bad nowadays, but relying on things like frame generation to claim that there's more performance on our graphics cards when clearly there's a huge disadvantage to using frame generation. It increases your latency and there's more artifacts in the actual gameplay. But Nvidia conflates the frame generation performance with actual performance. It is still good for a lot of people. I just wish they didn't put it in our face with advertising when it's not really true. Nvidia has also introduced things like their newest version of their upscaler, DLSS, with the transformer model. This transformer model honestly looks really, really good. Okay, I don't like that we're relying on upscaling to make our games even function or even look right without upscaling, but the transformer model does do very well. It's very impressive, the image quality it puts out, and they've been very fast to implement a lot of these things. So Nvidia made a system where you can override your driver and upgrade it to the latest version of DLSS. And this is because Nvidia knew from the beginning that DLSS was going to be meant to be upgraded. People really want to have DLSS and the quick support that DLSS offers. And I did a little bit of an investigation, I guess you would call it, not that long ago. I looked into what games actually support the newest version of DLSS versus what games actually support the newest version of FSR, which is FSR 4. You see that out of the 35 games that I tested up here in the upper left, 33 of them supported the newest version of DLSS. And actually quite a few of the games supported the newest version right out of the box. Like you didn't have to like override the driver or anything like that. Go over to FSR 4. Out of the 35 games that I tested, only 17 of them supported FSR 4, which is not nearly as good, okay? This is a little bit dated. I tested this, like a month or two ago, I think 2 months ago. Things have changed a little bit, but at the same time, I don't think it's that much further off from this. Now, FSR 4 is a great technology. It looks really, really good, but it has some flaws, like that thing where AMD just doesn't introduce this in the newest games very quickly. I want to bring up some examples of this because this is part of the frustration that you might have if you have an AMD graphics card, is the software support. Right here is when they introduced their 9000 series graphics cards, the 9070 XT and the 9070. This was back in March. They promised right away that they're going to be getting FSR 4 in over 30 games, at least I think by the end of 2025, which doesn't really say that much because the FSR 4 only launched in like a few games, and a lot of those were just Sony ports because Sony works with AMD. And then if you look to the future, like driver updates, here's an example of a driver that came out a few weeks later after those cards actually released. Game support so that you could play the game at launch for Assassin's Creed Shadows and also Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. But you will notice here that there's nothing about having FSR 4 support in this game, because it does require from AMD, at least at this point in time, to be able to enable FSR 4 within the driver. AMD is not mentioning at all that this brand new game, high profile game from a big developer, I'm just gonna ignore all the controversy with it. And it took them until the next month to actually provide FSR 4 support for Assassin's Creed Shadows. Also, these aren't dated in the driver change logs themselves. I'm manually putting these dates with the inspector tool in Chrome. For an entire month, with buying this new graphics card with this promised feature, you're playing a brand new game, all this costs a lot of money, and you're not going to be able to get the best image quality on your new graphics card. Now you will notice that Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered is right here, and it also has FSR4 support. So some games have pretty quick support. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 also came out in like February, and it wasn't getting support until April here. So not really good look there. And one last driver I want to look at here, that came out in August of this year, but I don't know if it ran correctly, but it was 2 weeks earlier pretty much that Wu Chang Fallen Feathers came out, and it wasn't getting new game support or FSR4 support for the entire launch window of that game. It's better than what we saw for like a month with Assassin's Creed Shadows, but still, a new game comes out and you can't use the feature you want on your graphics card for it. That is compared to Nvidia. When you look at their driver updates, say Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, this was July 24th that this game came out. Nvidia's driver for it with game support came out on July 22nd, so 2 days before it, prepped for the launch of the game. They also added DLSS 4 support for it. I don't even think this was overridden. I think this was built right into the game for Nvidia. So you see that they have a better integration with game devs and everything. That also includes, if you just look on the side here, Battlefield 6. If you've played or even seen anything about the beta, this game already has DLSS 4 support in it. So if you have an Nvidia graphics card, anything back to 20 series, which came out in 2018, can support this newest DLSS 4 upscaling technology. And if you have at least a 40 series graphics card, you can use the frame generation. AMD does do better on the frame generation stuff. More graphics cards can support frame gen on their side. So they have the ability in their driver to toggle this globally now. So like you can just hit one toggle and every single game you're going to be using the newest version of DLSS, so they're going to look as good as possible. Or you can choose whatever version of DLSS you want actually, depending on the preset. Now you might be wondering, why the hell am I making this video? If Nvidia is so far ahead, why am I even covering this when it seems like AMD's team is so far behind? Some things really did just change, and it seems like AMD almost did this accidentally. The community support is really interesting, and AMD has revealed some technologies and accidentally leaked some things to the public, and now we have our grubby mitts on them and we can actually check these things out. AMD just recently announced, or they actually released, their new version of Fidelity FX SDK, which Fidelity FX is FSR, basically. This is the SDK. This is for like developers and stuff. You can download it right here. There's also a GitHub. And here is that GitHub. So basically all this stuff is now open sourced, which Nvidia is not open source. Intel still isn't open source either. Now, a big thing about this is that this includes FSR 4 in the whole package. This is something that now developers, instead of having to do this stupid thing where AMD graphics cards have to go in and then enable in the driver, now developers could actually start to integrate this into games, and you don't have to do all that bullshit. But not only did they open source that stuff, but also this includes things like FSR Redstone. Now this is the start to something a lot larger, at least I'd want to think. Something I haven't even mentioned yet is that Nvidia, but they also have a ray reconstruction for ray tracing. And we needed to take a quick step back just to understand ray tracing in general, because ray tracing is so graphically intensive. There's no way that we can cast a ray for every single pixel on the screen so we get a full image. So what a ray traced image ends up looking like, a very speckly, very noisy image, and then we use things like denoisers to try to cluster together that noise and to make it look like a decent looking image. These denoisers, they only have so much to work with, so they can look kind of weird. What ray reconstruction does is, instead of using like handmade denoisers, they use AI ray reconstruction, or AI denoising, I guess. And they combine it with the super resolution in the game in order to make a better looking image with ray tracing. In some cases, it could give you better performance too. At the end of the day, Nvidia has this technology. It's not even in that many games because it's really only in games that have path tracing, which is full ray tracing support in the game. So I can only think of it being in Cyberpunk, Alan Wake 2. I don't even think it's in Black Myth Wukong. It's in Doom the Dark Ages. I'm starting to draw a blank at that point at what other games it's in. But now AMD is starting to push for this ray reconstruction approach. They are introducing FSR Redstone, and that is also present in that same SDK. Developers are gonna have an easier time, I would think, integrating it into their games. But a lot of developers probably won't do this, just like how they haven't for Nvidia either, because path tracing is so hard to run. Well, why is it worth the dev time for like the 20 people on Earth that are gonna play with it on? I will say that the AMD's like demos that they've shown of this whole path tracing denoising thing does not look that good. I think it looks like a old Pixar animation that came out probably 25 years ago or something. Like, it does not look that good, but we'll see, I guess, where it progresses. And at least there is competition in the space. Now, something else interesting is FSR4 is a great upscaler. However, it uses those AI models, and it needs to have graphics cards that are capable of actually running these models, and that is basically restricted to only their newest ones. So their 9000 series graphics cards, which does suck. And AMD did speak on this. This was at the launch of their, or actually the reveal of their 9000 series graphics cards back at CES of this year.
Does that mean that FSR4 is going to be exclusive to the 9000 series?
Right now it has to be because of what I just said. It requires a lot of compute. It's not that we don't want it to be more compatible across more platforms. Our FSR strategy remains exactly the same on FSR4 and the future as it has been up to now. I'll tell you that we are looking at, can we optimize the algorithm so that it can run leaner and it can run on more devices?
What's interesting is he did hint to it that they were working on something like that. And what we did find that AMD completely messed up on is when they open sourced the FSR SDK, the version 2 of it, they accidentally leaked some stuff that wasn't supposed to get out. Accidentally put out the entire FSR4 source code open source, which I don't know. Like, AMD does a lot of incompetent things. I'm not gonna lie, you're gonna hate me for saying that. Some people are, but they do a lot of things that are pretty dumb, and they accidentally just open sourced their entire FSR4 technology, which would sound weird compared to older versions of FSR, and maybe that's why this was a mistake, is older versions of FSR were open source completely, but those weren't like super impressive technologies, so I kind of understand why. I'm not like a legal expert or anything like that, but from my understanding and what they say in this videocards.com article, if they accidentally open sourced it, then they received permission at the time to use it, copy it, and modify them. Deleting the files later does not cancel license already granted. So basically, if you downloaded it, you might have access and can use all of FSR4 because you were permitted to do this at the time. It's like AMD made this mistake, and this legally might be something they cannot take back at all, even if they did not intentionally want it to happen. Is in some of those files we did see, and we actually still see to this day. You can go on this right now. There is versions of FSR4 right here. So FSR4 model FP8, which is the floating point 8 thing, I'm pretty sure, which is what 9000 series graphics cards run on. And these have the quality presets for it. So there's balanced DRS, which is dynamic resolution scale. This is native, performance, quality, ultra performance. So basically everything is there. However, you go down here, it's like, well, what are these other ones? They still say balanced DRS, native, performance, quality, ultra performance. What are these? Well, these are i8 versions of FSR4, which is integer 8. Now, these would be a cut down AI model that they would be using for older graphics cards. It was clear that, according to this, that AMD was working on, maybe it might never happen, or maybe this is still yet to come if they can get it to work well. They're trying to make a version of FSR4 for their older graphics cards. Now, we have seen some people, at least on Linux, it hasn't been possible on Windows up to this point in time, but some people have been able to mod FSR4 and use this integer 8 version in order to make it work on older graphics cards. And we've seen that there's a quality improvement from the way the games look, but the performance suffers. Not really worth it, or it's not in a finished enough state at this point in time in order to get it working on those graphics cards. Another thing I really want to show you in this video is people have been able to bypass some of the biggest problems with FSR4. And some people have been able to get FSR4 running in these games with a simple DLL swap. So instead of having to go into the driver, change things out and everything, approve it with all that, they're able to just swap out the DLL and make that happen. And the thing that makes this weird is this is the same DLL file, like the actual FSR file, that is for FSR 3.1 and also FSR 4. It has to detect some way on what graphics card you're on so that you can use the newer version if at all possible. And that's something that the driver typically does for you. I think we can hop over and try this for ourselves. So we're on my other PC right now. You see I have a bunch of different folders scattered around because I've been backing things up and testing this for myself. I already kind of understand how this works. What you need to do is go down to the FSR website and download the SDK package. You'll get this folder here, which says Fidelity FX SDK version 2.0.0. You're gonna need to go through kits, Fidelity FX, bin, and these are actually going to be the FSR files for FSR 4. I like to sort these by file type, so that the DLLs are up top. These are the files we actually want. Let's do this in The Last of Us Part 2. This is the normal FSR file. It is just called AMD Fidelity FX DX12. DX12 is DirectX 12, the API that it runs on. But none of these files on the left side actually look like that. So what we actually have to do is rename this file to take out the loader portion of it. So just backspace this up and do that. All right, so I already have these. I'm gonna go ahead and just open up FSR for DLL, and I already have these set up. So if you wanted to separate these, put these somewhere else, these are the 3 files you need. In game, there isn't actually the same file structure. The new file structure for AMD FSR 4 and everything does have a couple other DLLs that are separate from this stuff. They look a little bit different. I already backed up. I would recommend backing up the original AMD FSR version, and then you can just go ahead and drag it into the game. But first off, let's look at what the game looks like without FSR 4 actually in it. So let's do Last of Us Part 2. If you hop into the settings, it says FSR 3.1.3. We're gonna put it on performance mode. The reason I chose this game is because it does actually read the game files and show you which version of FSR that you're on. And this game does officially support FSR 4 through the driver. I'll just hop in game really quick and just see what the heck this looks like, because I'm gonna tell you, it doesn't really look that great. Send a game, we're getting about 63 FPS, basically rendering up from 1080p up to 4K. And something else I want to point out is that the game, in general, I think this is a decent implementation of FSR. However, you see the left side of the screen that there's some shimmering with that railing and everything, and generally speaking, the grass and everything just looks kind of blurry. The image really does fall apart in motion. You see, like, as I turn the camera, all the grass doesn't really stay together. It just kind of gets split up and is all weird and stuff. If you even see around, I'm gonna get off the horse, see around Ellie's head and all that, there's like almost like a haloing effect around the actual grass, because it's a lot of, you know, dense detail. And even if they did a pretty good implementation of FSR here, it doesn't hold up all the time. And maybe some of you guys noticed there, but the video I actually recorded was kind of compressed, so it hides a lot of the actual flaws with it. Here's a higher quality recording. You can see just in general, the entire footage of FSR 3.1 is pretty blurry, as well as if you do focus on things like the grass, very dense detail, it just bleh. Let's go ahead and check it out with FSR 4 in the game. And it's pretty simple. Once that file is renamed, all you gotta do is take these and drag them into here, and then replace the original FSR file that's in it. Again, have it backed up. If you can do that in the games, you can actually go through, if you do make this mistake, you wanna restore it to how it was before, you can go to the game files, hit properties, at least on Steam, and then you can go to installed files, and then verify the integrity of game files, and that should restore anything that's been changed against Steam's, you know, database. But I'm gonna go and replace the file in this destination. And just like that, I'm hopping into display, and you can see that we're now on FSR 4.0.2 just by dropping in those old files, which is something we wouldn't be able to do with FSR before. However, you see it's not enabled in the driver, and we're seeing it in game, which is a good sign, because even if AMD doesn't update their driver in time, then we could actually upgrade the version of FSR so that we could get this at launch on games, which is annoying that we have to do that and that they aren't supporting their GPUs quickly. However, at the same time, at least we can do it. Now, hopping into game, you can see that the frame rate did change a little bit because FSR 4 is harder to run. It lost about 8 FPS. It's looking a lot better, I'm not gonna lie. The shimmering is handling a lot better. It looks a lot more stable. I can actually see individual grains of grass and everything. When I turn the camera, it looks like more of a natural look. The things don't look speckly and pixelated as I'm turning around the camera. Now, it will, I'm not gonna do a super in-depth image quality comparison here, but if you definitely saw this in person, you would be able to see this. I'm gonna go and turn her head here. We're seeing that same thing. It's like the haloing, like this looks so much better. Everything looks so much more natural. It is up to you. I think it's worth it in this title to play with FSR 4 on, but it is technically up to you if you think the performance hit that you're taking is actually worth the image quality improvement that you're getting. It depends title to title. I in particular want to point out how much of that shimmering is gone and just how much sharper and actually more natural the image looks. But I think this is a pretty large image quality improvement, especially if you're sitting pretty close to a monitor. Now, let me quickly show you how to undo this. So you just go here, and those two files, you know, you can see if you put this in a separate folder, which files you copied it in. So you can just go ahead and go here and delete these two things. You can go here and then delete this one as well. And then with the, you know, the backup version of FSR that you had, you can just go ahead and drag that back in there. and boom, just like that, the game is restored to exactly how it was, no problems. And I yapped a little bit too much here, I'm just in post, but I wanted to show you Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It's pretty simple. You just take the DLL, drag it into the game folder where the FSR thing is, and then it works in game. The performance is a little bit lower. I'd say the image quality is a little bit better as well, actually a decent bit better. Although I think FSR 3.1 actually looks decent in this game to start. So it's a little bit up in there if you want to use it or not. And the same thing, it's pretty easy to uninstall it, just, delete them files. Now, some interesting developments that have taken place with this new file and this newfound power that we have is with DLSS Swapper. It's called DLSS Swapper. It's funny that we're on an AMD card, but we're not going to be using DLSS, obviously. But if you were to take any game, say like Plague Tale Requiem here, the version of DLSS is on is 2.4, which is really old. But you could click on this and swap it in from the newest version of DLSS. This was a very good way of swapping out files and keeping track of it. So if you want to restore it to the old DLL that was in the game files, you can just press this button and it restores it back to that 2.4 version. What's interesting is if you hop into a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows with FSR 3.1, is you can swap out the DLL for FSR as well. You can swap out the DLL for XeSS as well. So Intel's upscaler. That's because with FSR 3.1, AMD changed the way that they structured the file, which means you could drag and drop in a new version of it to upgrade the version. Here they have FSR 3.1.3 and you could upgrade this up to 3.1.4. What a lot of people were getting onto was, hey, could we just import the file for FSR 4 and then we could just use DLSS Swapper day one for games to just put FSR 4 into them. So there's been some work that was basically into this forum thread for DLSS Swapper. Say extract the FSR SDK that we're talking about before, and then go to DLSS Swapper and then import that DLL. And we're gonna do exactly that. So I'm gonna go over here to the libraries of the upscaler, FSR 3.1. We go up here to import, and we're gonna import that one that is already renamed that we talked about earlier. And it says, okay, everything worked. FSR 3.1, let's click on that. And then this newest version looks a little bit weird. It doesn't say FSR 4, it says 1.0.2.4488. We're gonna swap that out. Let's go ahead and try to launch the game with this DLL swap. But see here in the options, it's not saying that FSR 4 is in the game. Now let's try to launch the game. That was weird. As you can tell, the game is kind of broken. Disappointing. It's disappointing. If we turn off this, let's see what happens. Okay, if you turn off FSR at that point, then it just crashes. So basically, using DLSS Swapper and just swapping in the DLL isn't enough. We have these new FSR 4 DLLs. We only put in this one when realistically we need to take out, or need to put in these two as well to make it function. We saw that earlier. We can also try this with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So let me just scroll to here, and then let's swap in the new version of FSR and then see if it is able to launch the game or not. This is a good sign. We're in the game. Okay. It says FSR 3.1 in the settings, but that's how it was before. Let's go ahead and load the game where we were. Well, I didn't think it was going to launch. And we see that it's a little bit problematic there, that I'm not editing this in post. You can see the crosshair and the HUD is still on screen where it should be. It's just the game is like up in the corner of the screen. And that's actually because the game internally is rendering at 720p, and that's a quarter of the screen. It's supposed to be 1440p. It isn't upscaling at all to bring it up to the output resolution. It's just staying at 720p. So I don't know if they'll add support for this in the future, but we were able to do it manually, but we weren't able to do it with DLSS Swapper, which is a bummer because of how easy it would be to quickly do that. Now, another bummer that ends up with this is, yes, we're able to upgrade the version of FSR 4 in the game, but from what I can tell, you can't do that in games that don't already support FSR 4. So I showed you in games like Last of Us Part 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, all of these games actually support FSR 4 through the driver, and we're able to swap in the game files to make it work as well. But if you were to do this in a game that doesn't already support FSR 4, even if it has FSR 3.1 in it. So a game, for example, like Hogwarts Legacy, I replaced the files in this game. It seems like you get a performance hit going from FSR 3.1 to 4. However, when you get into the game, it doesn't really look that different. There's a lot of shimmering around the hair and stuff. Now, this issue might be alleviated over time as developers integrate 3.1 into games more regularly, at least. Then it's more likely that it's going to work, or at least be a situation like Hogwarts Legacy, or it seems to accept it and launch, but it doesn't look quite right. If you know what's happening here, let me know. Basically, any game you think of, if it doesn't have official driver support from AMD, then it doesn't work with dropping in these files, which is a huge bummer because that's kind of the whole point of this. It's like, yes, we can do this independently of the driver, but it seems like there's something on the back end that AMD is still approving FSR4 to work in these titles. But we'll see how this evolves over time, and maybe they won't have to approve it in drivers anymore because we're starting to see inklings that we might be able to get around it. But something, if you're very, very interested in this, and if you want to get FSR4 working in games as soon as possible, nowadays, Nvidia's own support, their own great support for their games, is actually starting to work against them. Now you can swap out DLSS inputs to work with FSR4. If you are interested in doing this, there is a little tool called Optiscaler. Beautiful tool. And honestly, I thought this tool was kind of intimidating at first, but it's honestly not that bad. So this is the latest version of Optiscaler. You just want to go here and then download that file, and then that will basically end up looking like this once you extract it. It's gonna have a bunch of different things in it. I'm gonna delete a couple things in it. We're not gonna be looking at that yet. It gives you literally the instruction you need to do this right here. One game I really want to show you that has pretty bad upscaling in it. So I'm currently upscaling with the built-in TSR, so temporal super resolution upscaler that's from Unreal Engine 5. We're going from 1080p up to 4K. However, this game is rough. Like, do you see all the shimmering that's going on? That's not how the game is supposed to look. You even see like his hair. There's like this almost like cross-hatching effect to it. Like, it just doesn't look that good. And what sucks is on an AMD graphics card, you can't use FSR in this game at all. I mean, FSR looks so bad without AI that they just don't even think it's worth it. So they didn't even include it in games. And I see this a lot in Unreal Engine 5 games. They just don't bother to include FSR because it doesn't look good. But here's XeSS Balance, which is Intel's upscaler. This does use some machine learning, even on non-Intel graphics cards. Yeah, it looks a little bit better, I will say. There's less shimmering and his hair looks a little bit more together, but it doesn't look perfect. And this game has all kinds of problems with the noise from the Lumen software ray tracing. So a lot of speckling in his hair, even just standing still, his hair is like pulsing and stuff. Like, why is that the case, you know? So the first thing that we need to do, and this is a little bit at risk to your system, but you need to double click on this folder that says DLSS overrides. And you need to double click this, which is a registry tweak. But what this does is allow you in games to take advantage, because DLSS has such wide support, that you could replace those inputs with FSR and then just use FSR in the game. You do have to use a registry tweak, which is a deep thing in your system. You can go back on this just by double clicking this and it'll change it back to normal. So it really is not that big of a deal, but it is a little bit invasive. So just know that. And from here, it's actually pretty simple to get this to run. Let's go to my game drive. Let's go to Steam library, common, and let's get Expedition 33. You need to extract these files from Optiscaler and put them with the exe. But for Unreal Engine 5 games, this is not the exe file. You actually need to go to Sandfall, Binaries, Win64, and then the shipping version of it is actually the real file. And if you want to do this quickly, you could just go into the file folder structure. You can try .exe, I guess. So you can go here and then shipping.exe is there. And then you can just go your open file location and it'll take you to where it is. I would recommend backing this up. So everything that's in here, maybe except for the actual exe, I would just copy these over just in case. So you don't actually end up deleting the wrong file if you want to remove this later. And then back that up and then you can just drag in the stuff from Optiscaler. And then nowadays, it didn't used to always look like this, but Optiscaler has a little thing that says setup windows.bat, and you just double click this. It's an automatic way of doing this, and it'll bring up a command prompt. And most of the time, you just want to hit 1 here for it's going to change how it names certain files. So we're just going to hit 1, and it asks you if you're on an AMD or Intel GPU. We're on AMD, but hit 1 again. And it says, will you try to use DLSS inputs, enable spoofing, required for DLSS FG, Reflex to anti-lag 2. So basically what this is saying is, do you want to fake an Nvidia GPU even though you're on an AMD one? Probably don't want to do if you're on a multiplayer title. Honestly, any of these things where you're modifying game files, do at your own risk. In multiplayer titles, you're probably going to get banned because you're messing with the game files. So I'm going to hit 1, and then it's done. We're just going to hit another button, and then it just gets rid of the command prompt. And with that, we're pretty much ready to go. So I'm just gonna go ahead and launch up Expedition 33 again, and then we can try it with FSR 4 in it instead. What's really funny is hopping to the settings here, you can enable a DLSS, even though up in the upper left corner of the screen, we're obviously on an RX 9060 XT. We're not on an Nvidia graphics card. But we can put on performance mode. What is happening, basically? Now there is some settings you can like configure with by hitting Insert on your keyboard. And it brings up a little menu, and your cursor like doesn't interact with the game anymore, basically. Actually, it says our input is DLSS, and we're replacing DLSS with this upscaler below it, that is XeSS. So we want to change this into FSR. We can just do FSR 3 X4, okay? And hit change upscaler. You can actually see our FPS in the upper left actually increased just a little bit. And it says right here that we're on FSR 4.0.2. And you can actually change what model of FSR that you're using as well, which is, I think this is the only tool I've seen that actually allows you to change what model FSR. There's also a toggle for frame generation, which we'll look at in just a second. As you can see, FSR 4 is now actually running. It's replacing the DLSS inputs in the game, and now it's running. And we're at 64 FPS. You can actually see how stable the image now is, even though we're upscaling from 1080p up to 4K. That stuff is not shaking nearly as much. Okay, this is actually looking pretty damn good. His hair isn't just like morphing like it was before. Now it looks, I would say, a little bit too smooth. There's still a little bit of noise in it, but I would rather have that than like a pulsating hair. Okay. And we can also see if we hit insert again, if this was on a different version of FSR. So we could actually turn this to FSR 3.1.5. You can see our FPS actually went up quite a bit because it's faster to run the older version of FSR than to use the AI model with FSR 4. I can clearly see how much this falls apart in motion, a night and day difference, I think. Look how stable they are now. FSR 4 is a huge improvement. If you have a 9000 series graphics card, we'll see if it comes back to 7000 or 6000 in the future. And I would say it's worth the performance hit you get in this game. Nvidia has that Reflex technology, that low latency technology that we'd like to have on our AMD graphics cards as well. And how we do this is actually with a little bit of a workaround that integrates into Optiscaler, which is pretty cool, I think. So you have to download just another tool. I'll link everything in the description. And it's called Fake NV API. Super simple. You just go to the actual GitHub page and download the latest version, extract that. Now, all you want to do is copy these two and then put them in there. And then that's in the Optiscaler folder. So when you copy over stuff from Optiscaler, you'll just copy those along with it. And then if you, on top of that, want to add FSR frame generation to replace DLSS frame generation in games, download this. Now you have to go to Nexus Mods in order to download this, which is kind of annoying. You're gonna download files, and you're gonna do the first one that's up here, DLSS G to FSR 3.13. And then you're gonna go in here and you're just gonna copy over DLSS G to FSR 3 AMD is better into Optiscaler. And then you're gonna have these 3 new files in Optiscaler. From there, if you want to just copy those over to Expedition 33, for example, then we can go back in and launch it. So again, right now we're on DLSS performance mode, and then we're just gonna turn it into FSR 4. If you want to go through and enable something like Nvidia Reflex, right here, we can enable this even though we're on an AMD graphics card. This uses exclusive Nvidia technology, and so does AMD's Anti-Lag 2. They're exclusive to their brands. We can hit enable on this, and the game actually does feel a little bit more responsive. Alt-Shift-L, it's gonna bring up a little overlay that is actually for Anti-Lag 2. This shows you the latency for AMD on their graphics cards using Anti-Lag 2. It uses the same type of thing that Nvidia Reflex does. We can track the latency based on using that route for the Reflex API and everything. Now let's go ahead and try replacing frame generation, DLSS frame generation with FSR. Now really quick, before we do that, I wanna show you how to uninstall. All you need to do is remove optiscaler.bat and it'll bring up a command prompt. And I think it's because this modifies some files. You're just gonna hit yes. It's gonna remove Optiscaler pretty easy. Press any button to continue. And that removes all of the base Optiscaler files. And if you reference back to what our Expedition 33 looked like from here, it did not have all these extra files before. So basically what we wanna do is just delete everything that doesn't have to do with the old version of the game. I'm just gonna go through and delete all that. I want to get this looking pretty much like how the backup looked before. Let's go ahead and get frame generation work, or Black Myth Wukong. And then we're just going to go ahead and set up a windows.bat, hit 1, 1, 1. You can see that we have DLSS on here, even though we're clearly on an AMD graphics card. Actually enabling FSR 4 in the game has a huge improvement over FSR 3. It doesn't even have 3.1 in this game technically, so this also doesn't work with the driver upgrade. So Optiscaler is a great workaround. FSR frame generation as well. So we can turn DLSS into FSR frame gen. We saw that we put in that file earlier, that DLL, that now gives us access to FSR FG via Nucom's DLSS G. Currently, without relaunching the game, it doesn't allow me to turn on frame generation. It's grayed out, so it must think I'm basically on a 30 series Nvidia graphics card that doesn't have access to frame generation. Now we need to fake it that we're turning FSR frame gen into DLSS frame gen. Just want to quit the game and restart it real quick, and then we should have access. Okay, now back in game, we can actually go to settings, and then we can go to graphics. You can see, oh wait, I messed up. So you can actually basically set up presets for the games. Any file for the whole Optiscaler and everything. You need to change this to the Nucom's thing, and you need to save that any so that it knows what it's launching with and actually is telling the game what you're trying to run. You can basically save presets as well. So if you want to leave this permanently in your game files and everything, then you can just set it up exactly how you want it. So we're gonna go ahead and restart the game again with saving the any. I kind of forgot to do that. And there's even big red text that told me to do it. And now if you go into the settings, then, oh my God, I pressed the wrong button. You go to graphics, and now we have frame generation available to us. I still hate that the game is in Chinese. Like why it knows the game's in English for me, but it still says Chinese. But as you can see, our FPS went from like the mid 50s or low 50s to now almost 90. So obviously it's on right now. Alt Shift L, that we can see what kind of latency we're getting. And we're getting about, 90 FPS. We're getting around 40 milliseconds of latency. So it's really honestly not that bad to play. I think it actually feels decent right now. Basically, you just replaced everything from DLSS into everything from AMD. That includes the upscaling, the frame generation, the low latency technology. They put in the work to get things supported in games day one, and then you can basically use the community support, make it work on your AMD graphics card using all of AMD's technologies day one as well with Optiscaler. Now, I wouldn't recommend this if you're using it in like a multiplayer game. I just don't recommend that. At the same time, it's still super useful. It helps you get the most out of your graphics card. I do hate that AMD isn't the one that goes out and does this proactively and is really on top of the ball for this. If they really want to compete with Nvidia, that's something that they need to work on. It's annoying that the community has to do this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, at least you can. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Has this been enough? I'll be linking everything. It's super easy to uninstall it too if you need to do that. And I'm really excited to see where things go into the future, because AMD accidentally leaked all of their FSR 4 dev files on their page. So I'm wondering if people are going to make offshoots of FSR 4 if they're able to download that in time. And maybe we could see FSR 4 using things like Optiscaler working on older AMD graphics cards, and see if that's something that is even possible. If you're watching this video at launch, there's actually a good chance that I am playing Hollow Knight Silksong on launch day right now. So if you want to join in for the live stream, it is on this channel. Check it out. I'm gonna see you guys next video. Y'all have a good one, and peace.